Welcome to Commercial Real Estate Pro Network's CRE PN Radio. Thanks for joining us. My name is Jade Aaron Gross. This is the podcast focused on commercial real estate investment and risk management strategies. Weekly, we have conversations with commercial real estate investors and professionals who provide their experience and insight to help you grow your real estate portfolio. Today, my guest is Tom Cruz. Tom is a 33-year-old real estate investor based in Wilmington, North Carolina. After graduating from UNC W, Tom started wholesaling real estate and then graduated to buying single, small multifamily properties. And in just a minute, we're going to speak with Tom about Section 8 real estate investing.
Yeah.
But first, a quick reminder, if you like our show, CRE PN Radio, there are a couple things you can do to help us out. You can like, share, and subscribe. And as always, we encourage you to leave a comment. We'd love to hear from our listeners. Also, if you'd like to see how handsome our guests are, be sure to check out our YouTube channel. You can find us on YouTube at Commercial Real Estate Pro Network. And while you're there, please subscribe. With that, I want to welcome my guest, Tom. Welcome to CRE PN Radio.
Appreciate you having me on.
Well, I'm grateful for you to be here and looking forward to our talk.
Yeah.
Before we get started, if you could take just a minute and share with the listeners a little bit more about your background.
Sure. Yeah, my name is Tom Cruz. I'm originally from Rio de Janeiro, Brazil. I grew up in North Carolina and started investing when I graduated from college at University of North Carolina in Wilmington. And I started with wholesaling real estate, buying property or putting properties under contract and then flipping them to investors that wanted to flip the properties or, rent them out long term. And that's how I essentially got my start and started building down payments for what would move into single family and also small multifamily real estate investments for the long term. I've always wanted to do buy and hold. I always wanted that whole, passive income aspect. And I just knew that, doing wholesaling or doing flips or doing Airbnbs wasn't the way. So I got into, then I accidentally fell into Section 8.
Got it. So your portfolio now, how many units do you currently have?
Yeah, I'm right under 400 single family and small multifamily. When I say small multifamily, I mean duplexes, triplexes, and quads, anything less than 4 units. I don't do any apartment complexes or large scale multifamily. It's just not very conducive for Section 8 or HUD. So I focus mostly on single families in the same zip code. And I have most of my holdings are in North Carolina. And then I also am buying in Ohio, Tennessee, and South Carolina.
Yeah, well, that's quite impressive. How many years have you been investing?
A little over 8 years. So I started when I was a couple years after I graduated from college. So I was 24 is when I really started wholesaling quickly. And then just over the last 8-9 years, it really scaled up from there.
That's awesome. Well, that's great.
Thank you.
Well, let's talk about this. The Section 8 is a term that I think most everybody's heard of.
Correct.
But I would doubt that everybody knows exactly what it is or how it works.
Right.
If you could start with just kind of defining what it is and kind of get into how it works.
Sure. In a nutshell, Section 8 is a federal program. The U.S. government will pay the rent directly to the landlord for economically disadvantaged people that are pretty much at the poverty line or below. So if you get a rent, for example, at $1,400 a month for your unit, Section 8 will pay up to 100% of it. In some instances, if the tenant has, a part-time job or full-time job, then they might have a portion of the rent as well. They might pay $200 or $300 out of that $1,400. But for the most part, they pay the lion's share of the rent. They stay for a much longer period. That's what I really like about Section 8 is there's almost no turnover with it. So yeah, that's essentially what the program is.
Got it. And how did you get attracted to it?
Yeah. So like I mentioned before, I fell into it by accident. I was buying more middle of the road, B, C class properties, $170,000, $180,000 properties. And I just found that it just sucked up too much down payment money. So I started going, sub $100,000. And I found a unit, my first unit that I got into with Section 8. It was $55,000. They had a tenant in there at $1,350 per month on a 3-bedroom unit. And I was like, this return is insane. So I went, checked it out. I met the tenants, walked through the property. Everything looked normal. Up until this point, I already had dozens of units. So I kind of knew what to look for. And then the day after closing, I get a call from the seller and he's like, hey man, we need to switch you over to Section 8 direct deposits. And I was like, well, what do you mean? He's like, well, it's a Section 8 property that you just bought. And of course, that was never disclosed to me, when I bought the property. So he's like, how did you think I was getting $13.50 in rent on a $55,000 unit? I was like, okay, well, that makes sense now. So that's kind of where the light bulb moment hit. I mean, I had a little bit of a panic figuring out inspections, figuring out, direct deposits, figuring out how things work with the program. But it's really just a payment method. Regular tenants pay with a credit card or money order every month, and Section 8 pays with government funds. That's really the only difference. Outside of that, you have annual inspections. I mean, that's pretty much an hour every year. So it's not that difficult. I think where most people mess up on is getting the tenant and putting that tenant in the property. And that's where Section 8 gets all the misconceptions and kind of the bad rap is at that point.
Yeah, let's talk a little bit about that. I mean, you mentioned that the rent gets paid. It's
Right.
Instead of coming from the tenant, it's coming from the and is it the federal government or is it a local authority, like a housing authority, that receives the funds from the federal that
Yeah. So it's the program is funded federally, but you're right. The actual payments physically come from the local housing authority on a county level. That's correct.
Okay. And then the inspections, like you said, they're annually, and they somebody schedules a time and goes through and makes certain that everything's safe. Is that pretty much the?
Yeah. I call it the 3 S's: is safe, sanitary, and structural. They make sure there's no debris or there's no massive, foundation issues, and there's no roof issues. And then, as far as the inside, make sure everything works. Appliances work, utilities are on. And then there's more nuances to it. For example, if there's a cracked tile, even though it might be a hairline fracture, they would consider it a tripping risk. They might make you replace that one tile. So it's just a matter of experience and going through it to understand what they look for. But once you pass it, you just kind of sail on through for the next year. And we also have 2 inspections of our own, so we always are proactive to make sure that we're going to pass that inspection when it comes up.
Yeah, I was going to say I've had a little bit of experience with Section 8. One of my tenants was a Section 8, and I always felt like that inspection that was performed by the housing authority was kind of like an enforcer, as much for the tenant, because the tenants value having that Section 8. That's what's paying for their housing, and not wanting to lose that.
Right.
Have you found that to be mostly the case, or have you found otherwise?
No, I mean, it's both. I mean, that's one other huge advantage of the Section 8 program is with a regular tenant, you have no recourse. If they break a lease, you have to sue them or evict them. With Section 8, you just go to their housing counselor, let them know how they broke the lease, and one email or phone call from them, it puts the fear of God in them. They don't want to lose the housing assistance for life. And if they lose it, it really is for life. I mean, it's based on your social security number. They put it in their system and you get removed from the program. I've seen tenants lose their vouchers forever. So the inspections, yes, they're as much for the tenant as they are for us. It's just to make sure that, especially, 9 times out of 10, there's kids involved in the property. They want to make sure there's no lead-based paint or asbestos or anything that's going to be a hazard. So, but for the most part, once you get a good relationship with that inspector, and you understand what they're looking for, and the tenant, everybody knows the inspection's coming. It's not some surprise thing. So we're always prepared, and it's over 95% of the time on annual inspections, we're passing them.
Got it. And you talked a little bit about the tenants, the way they qualify at or below the poverty line as far as income goes. Is there not an allowance based on number of children, and does it not kind of ramp up if you have somebody has 3 kids? It's more than 1 kid, kind of.
Yes, they do have a formula. It's a very convoluted formula. They don't make it public, but they tell you what goes into it. A big part of it is number of dependents, so kids. Then the other part is disability status. If they're disabled or retired military, because the VA Veterans Affairs program goes also through the Section 8 program, safe housing guidelines and everything. So we've had veterans that are on Section 8 and they still have the same Section 8 inspections. So it's based on that. It's also based on their income. If they are on 100% disability that's the only income they get, then Section 8 is going to be paying a much higher percentage of their portion because they don't have enough to pay it on their own, right? Then you have utilities gets thrown into that. If they have, for example, I've seen, 2 people, like a couple, both full-time jobs, making $3,100, $3,000 as a couple, they're under the poverty line. But for Section 8, they still make enough where they would be paying a big portion of the rent, right? So on a $1,400 rent, they might pay $500, and Section 8 will pay $900. So every tenant is different. You can have the same house and 5 tenants, and you're gonna get 5 separate numbers every single time from them.
Right. And as far as setting the rent, how does the rent get set? Because at least what I thought I heard you to say was that the amount that they're going to qualify for in assistance is going to vary based on their own particular.
Correct. So the way that we do that is we look at it's all published. So you can just Google FMR HUD on Google, and it's going to show you exactly based on the county or the zip code, what they're paying in that area. So we look at that number and we just generally go between 10 and 15% above it. That's what we advertise the rent at. So if it's at $1,200, we're putting it up there for $1,300, $1,350, and then we'll just negotiate down from there, because the housing authority, they will waive it. That number that you see on that FMR HUD site is not set in stone. If you have a tenant that's been looking for housing for 3 months and they're desperate and they can't find it, and they have 3 kids and they're homeless, and they're essentially putting pressure on the housing authority, we found where they'll just say, hey, look, we can't do 1,300, but we could do 1,250. You go on the HUD website and it's listed at 1,200. So there are circumstances where they will pay above that. But the thing is, on a $50,000 3-bedroom house in Akron, Ohio, that rent might be $700. But if you go to Section 8, that rent's $1,100 all day long. So that's the big advantage, is that arbitrage between the low purchase price and the high rent, where Section 8 really, has an advantage there.
Yeah, I guess, or again, based on the need of the tenant is how that
it is. And that's also, back to your question, that is part of it. So in the event that they don't qualify for as high of rent, you have a chance to back out at that point. We decline tenants all the time. Hey, look, we're at 1,400 rent. The published FMR is 1,300. We'll come down to 1,300, and they'll say, hey, look, sorry, they make too much money, or, they don't have enough dependents, or whatever the reason, we can only approve 1,100. Okay, no problem. We'll just go to the next tenant. And that's their huge advantage. You can call any housing authority in the country right now, say that you want to get on the Section 8 waiting list. They're going to tell you, 2, 3, 4 years, depending on where you are. So there's a huge list of tenants, and it's never ending.
Well, let's talk about that real quick.
Sure.
The demand. So the demand for housing is infinite.
Yeah.
How does a landlord get plugged into the system so that they're a recognized opportunity?
It's simply a matter of calling the housing authority in the area that you're investing in and telling them that you want to be a Section 8 landlord. They have a form. You send them a voided check of where you want the rent to be sent to, and then they approve you. Normally a 2 to 3 day process. And then from that point on, once you have a property that's ready for inspection, you send it over to them. They put it in their system. Depending on the county, as far as how they notify the tenants, like locally in Wilmington, they literally just have a bulletin board in the office. They add the address, and then people go in there, they see it. They have my property manager's phone number, and they'll call them. But I have some counties like in Tennessee, and they have a straight up MailChimp list. They have an email list where every week they'll send out, all new properties that are online. So it depends on where you at, how advanced or backwards they are.
Got it. And the caliber of tenants, you've mentioned obviously veterans, people basically below the poverty line, but it sounds like a lot of the people that you've identified are primarily working poor, I guess is what I would say, based on they have jobs, but they're not able to meet the
guidelines.
Whatever the housing needs are in the community. Do you find that most of the tenants are, do you have you had any issues with tenants? I've always been kind of curious. My personal experience was great. These people stayed until their kids graduated from high school, and it's and the rent increases were always at or above market, based on their need. But I'm kind of curious, when I talk to people that haven't had an experience about Section 8, a lot of them have kind of a, I don't know about that. I don't know if I want to do that. Can you kind of describe your kind of range of experience, or has it all been rosy?
And this is the number one reason why we're just crushing it so hard with Section 8, is because of this misconception, right? People, before even accepting it, have all these, notions in their head as to how it works. So with Section 8, the tenant is like any other tenant. Until you screen a tenant, you don't know how good they are, right? So it doesn't matter if they're paying with Section 8 federal funds or if they're paying, out of pocket. So we screen them the same way. We check their background, we check their eviction, we check their credit, we check income verification, we check landlord verification. And we also go as far as having our property manager go to where they're currently living and seeing how they're living there. So the risk that we have on each tenant is virtually zero. I mean, outside, the only time we ever have a problem is if we place a tenant and then they get a new boyfriend or they get a new partner or they get, a business partner that's now living with it, whatever the reason. It's when there's kind of these unknown variables that come in, but that can happen with any tenant. So that's where the program gets its bad rap. I talk to literally hundreds of investors every month through my coaching program and just through people that are just wanted, on social media. And what happens is this: they hear that the rent is guaranteed. So the tenant comes to them, they waive, $1,500 cash in their face for a deposit. And they're like, well, I'm already going to get my rent every month, so let me just let them in. Let's sign a lease. And then 2 months later, they turn the house into a trap house. They're selling drugs out of it. The cops are there every day. And they're like, oh, I hate Section 8. If you don't screen the tenants, it doesn't matter what program they're on, what subsidy they're on, if they're regular or not, you're going to have problems. It's just, you're playing Russian roulette at that point with your $100,000 or $200,000 asset. So that's how we're able to stabilize and really scale, my portfolio, was making sure the tenants are all really high quality. And yes, you might have to go through 5, 6, 7 tenants before you get there, but it doesn't matter. I mean, the number, if I put a listing right now on Section 8 locally, I'll have, I would say by the end of the week on Friday, at least 25 calls. And then we just have a process. We send them a link, they fill out an application, and then it's all automated from there. They even the decline email will be automated if we decide to decline them. So it's just a matter of finding quality tenants, just like you've seen with yours. Every year, the rent increase gets automatically applied once you request it. That gets direct deposited. You have, like you said, annual inspections that are known. You just go by there, make sure that everything is good, and then it just keeps going.
Oh, what do you find is the average length of stay? Is it long? I mean, is it longer than normal market or?
Oh yeah. So the way that we do it, we found that most of these tenants stay for so long that we don't even do annual leases anymore. We do 5-year leases. Tenants sign it no problem. So we're signing 3 5-year leases on pretty much all of our tenants now with Section 8. And they're staying. I mean, like I said, I've been doing this for 8 years, on Section 8 for 6 years, and I still have tenants from my original properties that are still there. The only reason I see them leaving is if they die, especially the elderly ones. That's one option. And 2 is if they get older and they move away to be closer to family. Occasionally you'll get an incarceration, especially if you have other people that come into the house, like I mentioned before. And then even then, Section 8, I think we'll still continue to pay for like 3 months, depending on their situation, until I think there's waiting trial, or they have to be something has to formally happen before they cut they have to be convicted. So that could take months. So we've had tenants waiting trial, haven't been convicted, empty house, and Section 8 continues to pay. So that's all part of it.
Right. No, and even with that, I would assume that if you do have a vacancy and you're a known landlord with the housing authority, a call to them can republish your unit.
Instantly.
And yeah. So on basically the kind of the pros and cons we just talked about. I mean, you have the kind of the guaranteed rent, quality of tenant equal to, or as equal to a market rate tenant, as long as you screen them properly.
Exactly. Same thing.
Sounds like you mentioned a 5-year lease, which I'm guessing any landlord would be excited to have. Do you build in increases into that?
Yeah, we have built-in 5% increases, and that's just a high increase that we put in there. Normally it's 2, 3, 4%, but we're reserved the right to increase it 5%. And to the tenant, it doesn't matter, because the housing authority is normally going to pick up that difference. So if the rent increases $100, their increase might happen $15, $20, might be 20% of that overall increase. So it's never enough to really rock the boat with the tenant. So we're able to do that consistently without any issues.
Got it. What about do you face any issues with lenders or insurance companies when you are focusing on Section 8 rentals?
Fair Housing Act. They can't have any discrimination based on the type of tenant you put in there. But anything, no, lenders love it. I've gotten preferred terms when I've told them that it's going to be affordable housing and low income Section 8 tenants, because they get credits from you know, I think it's on the federal level. You know, if they have regulators in there, they have a certain amount of percentage of
Yeah,
asset.
LIHTC, low income housing tax credits. Yeah.
Exactly. They get
Yeah.
those for being able to borrow up against those types of assets. So they very much like those when we're doing that. And they know the rent's guaranteed. So the risk becomes that much lower, you know, as a borrower. On the insurance side, they don't even know. I mean, when I call my insurance agent at a new property, she doesn't ask, hey, is there going to be a subsidized tenant in there or not? It's going to be, cool. How big is the house? How old is the house? You know, what are the updates on it? So no, there's no downside from vendors or any third parties about Section 8.
Yeah. No, on the insurance side of things, I just know that on some of the like more apartment type policies and stuff, there's usually a question of uh, the tenants, are market rate tenants,
Yeah.
or they're, low incoming or whatever. And it's not like I think it's more of just a screening thing. And it could be, and I've not pressed the question, but I'm just wondering if the concern is a concentration of, if you have one or two, or Section 8 spread out throughout a a building, it's probably considered a lesser risk than if the whole building is,
Oh yeah.
you
Yeah,
know,
if you go into
sec-
homogenized communities like that, where it's 100% Section 8, and then you have like these HUD buildings where it's essentially the project where everyone is on the same assistance program. I'm sure there's some questions about that, because I can see there being, because it's just the wear and tear. People are home all day long if they're on assistance, and it just causes more risk in the property.
right. And speaking of which, you finding properties, you mentioned this one that you bought for 55 that rented for
Yeah.
1,300. Is there any particular things you look for when looking to acquire a property that makes it a better Section 8 potential rental or not?
Yeah, I mean, I have a pretty set criteria. I'm looking, for 3 bedrooms, 2 baths, under 1,000 square feet, normally under 100 grand. I mean, anything under 100 grand that's move-in ready is going to cash flow. It's impossible not to. Almost any county in the country, the rents are going to be too high, especially on 3 bedroom units for it to not cash flow. And then you don't have many expenses, especially if there's a new roof, new HVAC, new water heater. I mean, you're going to be good for at least 10 years before you really have to worry about anything. So then it just comes down to tenant selection.
So let me ask you this, and I don't remember the
Yeah.
specifics, but I remember having some sort of there was I don't know if it was a wrinkle, but there was just some sort of condition. If I'm a current landlord and I have a property and I have a tenant that is historically or regularly late, or there's always a story, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
Um, is that an option for me to encourage them to seek out Section 8? And, you know, clearly this isn't working for you. You need some help in paying your rent. Why don't you go, check out Section 8 and see if they can help you, see if you qualify?
You can, but the problem is the waiting list. They're going to be waiting years before, to the point where you're not going to want to tolerate. It's not just a situation where you can be like, hey, Tom, go call housing authority, get some free rent and come back and see me. It's a whole process. I mean, you have to prove that you've been trying to get a job. You have to prove that you fall below that. You have to provide tax returns. You have to provide everything in order to even be considered for assistance. And then you have to wait, for people to get off the program, or for people to have available slots for it. So it's as great as that would be to say, hey, just go to this office, call this number, and then you'll get free housing. It's not that easy.
No, I remember that, and now it's even silly to even ask the question now that I'm thinking about it, just based on what we talked about, just the demand being so much. And
Oh
because
yeah,
the pool of funds is not infinite, it's the demand for the funds and the demands for housing that's infinite.
exactly.
And that's just a continuum, or it just continues to be an issue. On I was going to ask you about, you'd mentioned fair housing.
Correct.
So if there's a tenant that has a voucher, and they come and they see my property that's for rent, and they apply, there's no way for me to refuse them, is it? If I have a unit for rent and they qualify in every way except that they're Section 8, can I say no Section 8 in my
Um, You can, you can't legally say no. You can't discriminate based on the voucher type. And there's even some legislation now they're wanting where it makes it even more difficult or it could be illegal. But as far as we always advertise it, I always put vouchers accepted, and they're going to get priority. We're going to look at those applications first, right? Because that's our portfolio is comprised majority of subsidized properties. But no, you can decline or accept based on any reason, as long as you're screening everybody equally, you know what I mean? So as far as you're holding the same standards for background checks, for as long as it's an equal opportunity for everyone to get housing, then you'll be fine. But as far as advertising and marketing it, I'm pretty sure you can't discriminate based on how they're paying.
Yeah. No, I was just thinking about it. It seems like there are those, I see some sort of an ad that, it says, I mean, people either say they do or they don't.
Right. Yeah.
I guess and if they uniformly don't, then I guess it wouldn't be discriminated. So we just don't, that's just not something we work with here.
Yeah.
So I get that. So you've got 400 units now. What's your game plan for the next 8 years? Are you looking to?
I'm trying to get to 1,000 units, and then either, because what I'm finding is I've spoken to some institutional buyers and hedge funds and REITs that would be interested in buying, and most of them are between 500 and 1,000 units is really what they want to see. So my end goal is, by the time I'm 40, the next 7 years, pick up another 500 or 600 units and either just sell out and sell the whole portfolio. Most of my units are in opportunity zones, so by that point, most of those capital gains are going to evaporate. So I've held them already by 10 years from that point. And that's the kind of the tipping point. So yeah, I mean, that's kind of the goal right now.
Got it. And as far as financing, do you find is there any, you mentioned that lenders are excited to have you. Is there any different requirements for down payments or?
No, it's the same as a rental house, single family investment property. You're going to get between 85%, 80% loan to value, depending on the bank that you're working with. I work with private lenders as well. I use a lot of other people's money. I'll partner with people. They'll bring $500,000. I'll do the management of it. I'll do the financing. They bring the cash. There's a lot of different creative ways that I've done in order to get units under my name. And then inevitably 2 or 3 years later, after I stabilize the portfolio with Section 8, I'll do a cash out refinance, buy out my partners, and then I'll keep the units by myself. That's how I ended up with 400 units I have no partners. I solely own 400. That's because I'm always cashing them out, and they'll either come back in, at a later time and do more, or they'll reinvest in other assets.
Got it. And are you, as far as like your lending, are you doing, I'm assuming at 400 units, you've got some sort of an entity. You're not just,
Tom
Cruise.
No, I'm buying under multiple LLCs.
Okay.
I'm not doing like one per LLC. That just gets so ridiculous, I'll do anywhere from 50 to 100 per LLC. And then if I have a new partnership, then it's a new LLC. So I have, scattered hierarchies of these LLCs. And it also depends, like if I'm buying out of state, I'm using a property management company, right? So I don't need to set up a property management LLC, just a holding LLC. So it totally varies what I'm doing, who I'm doing it with how I set it up legally.
Got it. And do you have a management company then that you control that manages all these, or?
Locally, I do. I have 4 full-time managers here. Majority of my holdings, I say over 300 units, are in one zip code in Wilmington, North Carolina. And I have 4 full-time managers dealing with those. And then the other 100, actually be a bit more than that right now, are, like I said, between 3 different states. And I have property management companies for the most part on those.
And you say you have outside property management, or do you manage them?
Yeah, I have outside property management. If it's out of state, for the most part.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
But you're 300 local, you manage yourself then through your management company.
Yeah, I have a management company with those full-time managers.
Got it. Well, that's definitely an impressive track record so far, and
Thanks.
And an aggressive goal. And I don't see any reason why you wouldn't get there based on Seems like
it's just a constraint of inventory. That's really the biggest thing holding me back. I mean, I would easily be able to get 40 or 50 units per month if they were as consistently available as they were in 17, 18, 19, right? Now it's all post-COVID. Everybody wants $100,000 for their shack. So that's the biggest hold back right now.
No, I get it. I get it. Well, hey, Tom, if we could, I'd like to shift gears here for a second.
Sure.
As I mentioned to you before we started, by day, I'm an insurance broker,
Okay.
and I work with my clients to assess risk, determine what to do with the risk. And there's a couple of strategies we typically, look at. We first look to see is there a way to avoid the risk. If that's not an option, we look to see if we can minimize the risk.
Okay.
And when that's not an option as well, then we look to see if we can transfer the risk, and that's what an insurance policy is. And I like to ask my guests if they can look at their own situation. It could be their clients, investors, tenants, the Section 8 program, however you want to frame the question. But if you can identify what you consider to be the biggest risk, and for clarification, while I'm an insurance broker, I'm not necessarily looking for an insurance related answer.
Okay.
And so if you're willing, I'd like to ask you, Tom Cruz,
Yep.
what is the biggest risk?
I would say the biggest risk in not even Section 8 housing, but just investment housing or rental properties is going to be the tenant selection. Because if you think about it, buying the property is very low risk. You can always refinance it. You could always sell it. You could always rent it. You'll always have that demand there, especially if you're buying affordable housing under 100 grand, right? But with a tenant, depending on where you're buying, the risk can be huge. I mean, if you're buying in the Northeast and you put a wrong tenant in there, you could be waiting months to get the tenant out. Obviously, if you're buying in North Carolina or in the Southeast, it's a lot more landlord-friendly laws. So we can get a tenant out for $150 in 3 weeks, and they're out by the sheriff. So, and also you have the damage risk from the tenant. So if you don't screen the tenant properly, or if you're lazy on that part, I mean, it could cost you thousands of dollars, a lot of which, you're going to be out of pocket for because your security deposit won't handle it. Section 8 is surely not going to come in and handle the damage that a tenant caused independently. So I would say the biggest risk in rental properties is putting the wrong tenant in your asset. And the best way to mitigate that, like I said, is through screening.
No, I think that holds true for any landlord.
Yeah.
Screening is definitely a small price or small investment
Oh,
to
yeah.
make certain that you have a good relationship and or at least you start off on the right foot. Anything can
Definitely.
change, like you said, if they have a new significant other or something like that. But that's good. Hey, Tom, where can the listeners go if they would like to learn more or connect with you?
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. I'm pretty big on Instagram and TikTok. Both of my usernames are the same. It's T Cruz NC. T is in Tom, Cruz, CRUZ, and then NC like North Carolina. And then you guys can also find me at section8formula.com, section the number 8formula.com. I have a 15-minute intro video explaining Section 8 in more depth. And you can also book a call with me or somebody on my team to learn more. I have a $5,000 coaching program and course that explains how to buy properties, how to finance the properties, how to screen tenants, pretty much everything we talked about, but a lot more in depth. I provide checklists, I provide documents, everything you would need. And we also do monthly coaching as part of that. So you have access to me to ask any specific questions to your situation.
Great. Well, Tom, I can't say thanks enough for taking the time to talk today. I've enjoyed it and learned a lot.
Appreciate it.
And hope we can do it again soon.
Yeah, thanks for having me on, and I'm looking forward to it again.
All right.
All right.
For our listeners, if you like this episode, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Remember, the more you know, the more you grow. That's all we've got this week. Until next time, thanks for listening to Commercial Real Estate Pro Network's CRE PN Radio.